welcome back to Brashenomics. All the discussion about the things that go on in a neighborhood are pretty interesting because from top to bottom, you can have some of the best neighborhoods and the worst neighborhoods, but you never know who your neighbors are going to be. That can be a big part of buying a house and understanding what makes a good investment and what doesn't. It really does. It can come down to the street. It can come down to the neighborhood. It can come down to, well, pretty much anything. John Messer joins us, a top producer with John L. Scott, and is also a AJLS Foundation participating member. Well, first of all, welcome, John. How are you?
Thank you, Ben. I'm glad to be here. I'm doing great.
Well, we're happy to have you. And, we were just talking about the fact that you come from one of the most productive offices in the entire city. So you guys see a lot of different things going on in the real estate world.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting time now with a lot of buyers out there and not as much inventory to choose from.
It makes it a little tough. Buyers have a tougher time to get the house they want.
Yeah, you really have to be on the spot, quick, ready to go, pre-approved and all that before you start shopping.
Yeah. A lot of people out there want to go out and buy houses.
Right.
But a lot of people want to buy houses for an investment because, well, with house prices on the rise, people think, oh, hey, I'll go invest in real estate again. What should people be asking themselves before, like, purchasing, a house that they may choose to live in or rent out? I guess a single family residence. What should people be asking themselves before they go out and just buy a rental property?
That's a great question. I think the main thing is, does it make sense financially for you and your family? And there's a lot of components to that. Mainly, I would say, is your financial house in order? Do you feel like your debts are fairly well under control and you have extra cash flow that you could invest in a home? If those are yeses, then I would say it's definitely something to look at.
And what do you mean by, you typically buy a house because it's going to cash flow. Why is it so important to make sure your ulterior finances are in order? Well,
there's a few reasons. One is that it's a major investment. To get the best interest rates, as you know, if you're buying an investment property and you can put 25% down, that's going to allow you to have the lowest interest rate, keep your payments at a reasonable level, and like you said, to ensure that that house then cash flows every month. So if you're not ready with that large of a down payment, I would say that it may not be time. You could still consider it, but if you do have a lot of cash available to put into a down payment, then I would say it's time to seriously look at doing that.
Yeah, and I guess the other point is once you put it down, you can't really get it back.
You're right.
You can't just go get your money back because you want it.
Yeah, it's not like the stock market where you can pick up the phone and say, I want to sell my stocks. That's exactly right.
So what's the process? What do you feel like the best process is to determine, I guess, to go buy a rental?
Yeah, I think the main thing you need to do is to make sure you're working with a competent professional, both a real estate broker and also a lender. So once you have that team put together and then you analyze what your goals are, I think you're ready to move forward. So what I would recommend you do is to consider, if you're ready to buy an investment property, consider to buy something in a neighborhood that you already know and that you're comfortable with. You feel like you could live in that home. If you were to buy it and not rent it out, you'd feel comfortable living there. That's a really good acid test for what home to buy. And then
because you never know, you might end up
living there, yeah. And if not, at least if you've bought it because you like it and you do need to sell, there's a good chance you'll be able to sell it to somebody else also.
Isn't there a point of not getting too emotionally involved though, and making sure it's a good business decision more than just liking the house?
Yeah, definitely. That's another key point, is to make sure that there is a cash flow positive there. And then a lot of other things you need to do to protect yourself. Have a competent home inspection, make sure the home is sound, make sure you understand how you want to protect yourself from a liability standpoint, whether you want to create an LLC or just take out enough insurance to keep yourself safe. So you're right, a lot of other aspects need to be looked at.
Do you think that finding the right property is difficult these days?
I don't. I think this is actually an excellent time to consider doing this because there are a lot of properties out there, for example, that you can buy in the $300,000 range that you can rent out for $1,800 a month, and that will cash flow. 15, 20 years down the road, your renters will have paid off your mortgage. You'll own the house outright, free and clear, and you will have only had to put in 25% down payment, $75,000. And if that home appreciates at, say, 5% a year, that home will be worth double what it was when you bought it. So there you go. You bought a home basically for $75,000 down. The renters have made all your payments. 15 years down the road, it may be worth $500,000 or $600,000.
And I guess that puts you in a pretty good position whether you decide to rent it or sell it.
Yeah, at that point you own it outright. Your mortgage is no longer an expense you have each month, and of course by then most likely rents will be a lot higher than $1,800 a month, and that'll be just free cash flow to you other than your property taxes and maintenance.
Yeah. Do you I guess outside of the financial aspect, and we're here with John Messer with John L. Scott. John, I mean, finding that right property. We talked a little bit about neighborhoods coming in to the from the break. How important are neighborhoods when it comes to rentals?
I think they're key. Again, I would say you really want to try to find a neighborhood that you personally feel comfortable living in. So most buyers, they have certain things that they just don't want in a neighborhood. It can be busy streets is a real common one where, the traffic noise is just not something you want to live with. I would recommend you consider not buying an investment property for that very same reason. It's going to be harder to rent out, and it's going to be tougher to sell when the time comes.
Yeah, it's funny. We have a house in our neighborhood that was just bought for a good amount of money, and it's been renting for like $4,000 a month.
Yeah.
And it's incredible to think, these houses could rent for that much, but there are people out there who don't want to buy.
Yeah, that's right. People are here. They don't know how long they're going to be here for, or maybe they've gone through a short sale or a foreclosure and they just can't buy right now.
Yeah, and maybe there's a lot of different reasons, I guess, you would want to rent versus buy. Some people don't have the down payment. Some people don't want the responsibility.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Do you think, what else makes a good property?
I think that if you're going to try to keep renters in there for the long term, which is my goal, not to have a lot of turnover in your renters, having a nice home with a nice amenity. So, for example, kitchens are always big, right? It's the same philosophy when you're going to be a landlord as there is when you're going to be buying a home to live in. Most people want a nice kitchen, as your renters are going to want a nice kitchen. 4 bedrooms is ideal. There's a lot more demand for homes that have 4 bedrooms. Same thing with bathrooms. 2.5 baths is a common configuration that people want when they buy. And it's also common for people that rent to want that. So your basic analysis of what type of home to buy is the same analysis you'd go through if you were going to be living in that home.
It's interesting you bring up that 4-bedroom piece because as coming from the mortgage side, our team, we've been just consulting a lot of people who are like, well, I'm going through a short sale. I want to buy a house in 3 years or 2 or 3 years, 4 years, depending on their down payment. And a lot of these people, and they have families, they're upstanding people. They're just having to buy real estate at the wrong time. They've made a choice to maybe sell their house short, or maybe it's a financial decision on a monthly basis. But they need, there are people with families that need good homes to live in. Do you see that market emerging as people have maybe gotten rid of their old home?
I do. I see that too, where people, for whatever reason, have to move out of their current home, whether it be a bad timing when they bought their home and they're upside down now and they just can't continue to make the payment, so they have to do a short sale. Helping one family right now, actually, with that situation where they've lived in a luxury home that was worth, over $1 million at the peak of the market. That's now worth about $700,000. And so they're going through a short sale. And at the tail end of the short sale, when it's almost ready for closing right now, they're moving into a rental down for a little bit further south. And their payment, I think, will be about $1,500 a month. So it's going to really relieve the burden of finances on that family.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big dollar amount on a monthly basis. How do you protect yourself as a rental property owner? You have renters coming in. There are good renters. There are very strange or bad renters. How do you protect yourself?
Yeah, that's another really good question. So what I find from the rentals that I personally own is we're very careful and take a lot of time to make sure we're putting the right renter in there. So we have a screening process that we use. There's actually a company here locally in Federal Way that screens our applications. So a potential tenant would fill out an application. We would send it into the screening company.
What's the company?
It's called Rental Research Incorporated, and they do a really good job. They'll check your potential applicant's criminal background, their credit background. They'll check with all their prior landlords, and they'll also check their employment background. And then they'll send you back a report. Usually it takes a day or two that you can look at and make a decision whether that renter is a good risk or not a good risk.
But they're really doing a lot more due diligence and I would think that even finding a real estate agent to help you rent out your house is not the worst idea, because you can do a lot of this, correctly. There's a lot of ways to do a lease incorrect, to take the deposit incorrectly.
Yeah, that's a good point. There are excellent property managers out there, and that is a very good way to go, especially as a first-time landlord. And usually they only charge you 1 month's rent to find a good tenant for your place. And so that's a very good way to go also to protect yourself.
Yeah, I mean, there's. I was actually having a conversation earlier today with a property manager, and she was talking about how many ways there are to do things wrong. And I mean, she was talking about somebody who wanted to move out of the city. Yeah. And you actually can't take the escrow account from one bank, or the deposit from one bank to an out-of-state bank. It has to remain here. Yeah. So there's all these very strange, not strange, but minute rules that really have to be followed.
Yeah, I mean, there is a lot to it, and that's like when we started talking here about having competent professionals. I think that's really important. For example, there's a mold guide that every renter by law has to receive. And whether your home has mold or not doesn't matter. It's just a law. And if you don't know that, then you're going to be violating the law by renting your place out, because you just didn't know.
And if you do have mold, you should call Paul.
Call Paul. That's right.
John, we just have about a minute left before we have to go to break. What do you see as the biggest driving factors and benefits? I mean, it's mostly financial?
Yeah, I think that's it. So my philosophy is you can buy a home and let the renters pay that home off. And 15 or 20 years down the road, you'll own that home outright. So I'm not a buy and flip philosophy kind of guy. It's more of a conservative, long-term buy and hold approach. And, you can buy a home now if your kids are young. By the time your kids get into college, it's very likely you'll be able to sell that home and pay for your kids' college education using the proceeds from it. That's the philosophy.
Well, that's a pretty big thing to be able to pay for your kids' education with, right?
That's awesome. Yep.
Yeah. And even if you have to invest $75,000 now, hey, that's like 10% of what it's going to cost in 18 years.
Yeah, that's true. The way college is going up.
No kidding.
Exactly right.
No kidding. Well, John, thanks so much for joining us. Stick around. In fact, John's going to stick around. Paul's going to come back. And we are going to discuss if you should move or remodel and all the pluses and minuses to those both. I guess pluses and minuses to whatever you choose to do. I'm Ben Brashen. We'll be right back.